It is perhaps the most important trade a country can engage in today. Export of electronics and computer software is pivotal to a country's export basket, and more so after the pandemic hit us all. To get a sense on where India's exports stands, particularly to this sector, we have with us today Sandeep Narula, Chairman of Electronics and Computer Software Export Promotion Council of India. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Narula.
Thank you so much.
My first question to you would be obviously, how is electronics and software export doing? How was it last fiscal? What does it look like right now?
Well, as you are aware that pandemic has impacted the overall business scenario, and electronic and software is also no exception. However, during the last financial year, we have seen that it has not been very seriously impacted. However, the figures on two sectors, which we correlate. One is the electronic hardware, and another one is the software. Electronic hardware export has gone slightly low, while the software export has remained stagnant. We have not seen the growth which we were expecting. Going to this year's forecast, initially we were very hopeful because the second wave has not started. But with second wave taking damage to new levels, we have revised the estimate, and the current estimate for our electronic hardware export is somewhere between 10.5 to $11 billion, while the software export we are estimating to be close to $145 billion.
Right. So, why is hardware export proving to be a problem?
Well, for the electronic hardware, we have the serious supply chain issues. You would know that the component industry in India has now never matured. We are heavily dependent on our supply chain requirement from the neighboring countries. So most of the supply chain requirements are met from China. So one, that the hardware need physical movement of the goods, number one. Number two, the delays and constraint in the supply chain. These are the factors which have impacted the electronic hardware sector mainly.
Right. So my next question would be, a little loaded in the sense that, you talked about China, and we all know that, across the world, countries are heavily reliant on China. How is that becoming a problem for India? And what can we do to make sure that, India is the hub when it comes to electronic software export?
Well, it's very ambitious vision, I must say. And in fact, for a long time, India has been trying to excel in the electronic hardware segment as we have done in software. But somehow, due to reasons which are broadly the maturity of the industry in India, this has not taken the right shape. Since 2014, if you see, the government started giving serious thought process to how to strengthen India and make it a global hub, as we say in the software. India is the capital of the world. For that, we realized that the stepwise methodology has to be followed. So going by that planning, India came out with the PLI schemes for various sectors. And rather than net importer of electronics, how to become at least, if not net importer, how to equalize the requirement. So for that, PLI scheme was the beginning of the whole process. And then from PLI, we have a phased manufacturing plan, which is being followed. In the phased manufacturing plan, we would see low-hanging products which could be evolved for manufacturing in India. And going forward, the maturity in Indian electronics would eventually be when we start the semiconductor fabs in India. So I think that is a long-term plan. It will take some time, but I think planning is on the right track.
Right. So where did we miss out when it comes to electronic manufacturing? How did China get ahead of us? I mean, I know people have talked about the inverted duty regime at one time, but that perhaps cannot be the only answer.
Well, very right question. It needs serious introspection that we missed out, and where did we miss and how did we miss. Uh, but I would say that the vision from the government side as well as industry, I will not exonerate the industry. Even industry had to blame itself. Uh, Government policies were not conducive to the localization of the electronic hardware, and probably that is one of the biggest factor. And second factor, our industry also did not invest heavily into R&D. So we gave away what we could have. So I think these are the primary reasons where we have no control now.
Right. You mentioned the semiconductor fab as well, and the what's being said now is that silicon chips are the new toilet paper. So if we have to start addressing the complete vacuum that we have when it comes to domestic semiconductor manufacturing, how do we go about that? Making chips is not easy. It takes a lot of water. It takes a lot of infrastructure as well. Are we moving in that path?
Well, I wish the phrase that semiconductors like toilet paper is used to show that how important it is for any country today. Uh, if you allow me to dwell further into semiconductor constraint issue, uh, we have very few companies who have the semiconductor fabs in the world, and these companies cater to the entire world. When the COVID started, most of the fabs closed, rather they fired their people, estimating that this is going to last long, and especially the automotive industry, which is the biggest consumer for semiconductors in the world over, would not have a sector taking up. But for a change, we saw that the automotive sector world over reached to the new heights. On the one side, we had closed down on the fabs. On the other, the sector, consumer electronic, automotive, all these sectors, after the first wave of COVID, taking new leaps in the figures. So this has resulted into a serious supply constraint across the world. This is the background. Now, with this background, we have serious issues because the fabs are booked for long time, and the lead time has gone up to 52 weeks plus for critical components. Unfortunately for India, we do not have any fab in India, any semiconductor fab in India, and we are absolutely dependent on the fabs which are in Taiwan, Korea, places. So, ESC as such has come out with a study paper on semiconductor, which we would release shortly and share with you also. This gets into the problems, and this is not only a problem. No, we have come out with a solution which government can consider. I'm sure government is also working on incentivizing the semiconductor fab vertical, but I think it is going to be a long-term process, and we need to deal with it, and urgently we need to deal with it with the government support.
Right. You briefly touched on it, but the role of PLI, do you think that will be a very important element in domestic manufacturing?
I believe so. I will give you one example of the mobile industry. In the mobiles, we were the net importers in India. Uh, the import in India was fast going up, and the electronic import, if we had not come out with the mobile, would have surpassed the oil import bill. So, you see the potential, how big potential in the electronic as far as the consumers in India are concerned. So, with PLI coming into shape in India, now from the net importer of mobile phones, we have turned to be the net exporter. So this is the change we have seen. Now, how the PLI started, we have started gradually with assembling and then we are going into phase manufacturing plan. We are getting into LCDs, we are getting into plastic molds, power supplies, and some of the components. So the whole supply chain process for mobile phone, for electronic industry, would take ages, would take years and years. So this is not a year or 2 years job. So this planning has come into the pipeline, and I am very sure that this planning will get into the right conclusion and right supply chain development for India.
Right. So what about high-tech exports, which involve, advanced technologies like ML, AI, especially the software segment? How do we fare when it comes to that?
Well, as ESC, we have been giving a lot of thrust onto the quantum technologies, and especially the artificial intelligence, IoT. And in fact, ESC had recently done a IoT show that is called AIoT World, which was on the virtual platform. And we got a very good response, not only from Indian exhibitors who have developed the technologies and solutions based on advanced technologies, but also from the buyers world over. And this first show was really a big success. And I'm seeing that the numbers for the products and solutions in the advanced technologies are going up. And it's a value add for our country, because, for consumer electronic, for some products which are very low value addition product, we cannot compete China at this stage, or maybe Vietnam or other countries. But we have got very strong position where the advanced technology, especially in the domains I have mentioned, are concerned. So we are on the right track, and we have very strong footing in those sectors.
Exports is not all that simple nowadays. There's a lot of geopolitical push and pull, especially when it comes to electronic and software imports. We're seeing that how, the entire US-China angle is playing out. What are your thoughts when it comes to, something which is not just, which is just not, hinged on business?
Well, I think trade issues have been going on between India, between China and US. And I'm also seeing that people world over have realized not to have all eggs in one basket. I see that this as an opportunity for India. Uh, People talk about China plus one. People talk of additional alternatives for their requirements. So I see that India could become truly the right sourcing hub for the electronics for the world market, provided the industry as such start looking at the world market. No, I would say that industry somehow has in India been looking only at the Indian market. We need to have the transformation in the industry also, that how they look at the product market for their products. So the change is required, but I am very optimistic. I am seeing that whatever issues happening are bringing India to a stage where India can really pull its exports.
Right. My last question to you would be, what are the incentives or what are the support that you would want from the government, propel exports even further?
Well, as you know, India has been a late starter as far as the hardware is concerned. Software, we are very strong. Uh, in terms of support from the government, we have given a lot of expectations which have been shared by the industry. Uh, During this time, I think the biggest support that is needed is the liquidity. Though government is trying to do something on liquidity, but that is not sufficient. So one liquidity issue has to be dealt with by the government in the right spirit, so that we can actually get onto the ambition to excel in the exports. That is one. Second, in terms of incentivization, I think government can think on incentivizing like some relaxation on income tax, benefits on income tax, especially on IGST, which is one issue for exporters. And then we have pending issues on MEIS, which has been replaced with the other incentive methods. So ROTTAP. So ROTTAP issues have to be resolved at the earliest, so that industry can get the right incentive and do reasonably good in times to come.
Great. Thank you so much for talking to us, Mr. Narula. It is clear that the opportunities when it comes to export and global trade, especially in your sector, is tremendous, and it's up to the manufacturers and the country as a whole to take advantage of it. Uh, Thank you for talking to us once again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.